Today there is a lot of news from the Kherson direction. In light of the recent liberation of the island of Nestriga, the Russians were forced to divert forces from the already challenging Ukrainian foothold in Krynki. This shift further implicated their efforts to finally deal with the Ukrainians, who had been holding their ground for months despite the odds. The Ukrainians have recently developed and refined new tactics to create even more problems for the Russians in the region. In recent weeks, the Ukrainians have maintained the initiative in the region. Their army spokeswoman Natalia Humanyuk emphasized that Russian forces are unable to use armored vehicles for assaults on Krynki anymore due to heavy equipment losses, which is a direct result of the local Ukrainian electronic warfare and drone superiority, and the better coordination between their drone and artillery units in the region. She noted that these factors have forced the Russians to change their tactics, now resorting to daily light infantry assaults near Krynki, which result in heavy casualties. The ongoing Russian struggle to eliminate the Ukrainian bridgehead has resulted in the dismissal of Lieutenant General Arkady Marzoev, commander of the 18th Combined Arms Army, by the Russian Ministry of Defense. His removal was due to his failure to recapture the lost territory around Krynki. Anticipating the disruptions caused by this leadership change, the Ukrainians seized the opportunity to expand their presence and intensify their efforts in and around the village. In an effort to compensate for their lack of real success, the Russians have repeatedly claimed they have cleared Krynki of all Ukrainian forces. As you may remember, this included several attempts to raise a Russian flag in the ruins around Krynki as proof of that, which led only to the destruction of the personnel involved in these operations. Ukrainians decided to prove that they could not only do this better, but also give this action a more meaningful purpose, so they started to deliver and put Ukrainian flags by using drones. This enabled them to reach hard-to-get places and preserve the valuable lives of their soldiers. Again, using drone technology to their advantage, the Ukrainians started putting flags in multiple places along the east bank of the Dnipro River. The first instance of this tactic was a direct response to one such Russian attempt around Krynki that was followed by a claim that the village was now under Russian control. In reaction, Ukrainian drone operators dropped a flag in the middle of a field near the settlement, knowing the Russian commanders would send troops to remove it by any means. Attempting to do so in the open field meant certain death for those sent on this mission. The Ukrainian flag stayed for a long time due to multiple failed Russian attempts to take it down. Building on this tactic, Ukrainian fighters decided to take this tactic up a notch and started putting flags on higher objects, which are very hard to reach. The first such case can be seen in the following geolocated footage from Krynki, which shows how a flag is positioned on a water pump to provoke a reaction from the Russians. Such actions push Russian forces to try to remove these flags as quickly as possible, either by sending their valuable FPV drones to blow them up, an often challenging task, especially on the first try, or in most cases, by sending troops to do it manually, disregarding their life, which is in constant danger while doing it. Encouraged by the success of this tactic, Ukrainians began employing it in more villages along the Russian side of the river. Geolocated footage from Kozachyi Lahari highlights just how dangerous this can be. As seen in the previous instances, Ukrainians typically place flags on high ground objects with good visibility, like chimneys and water pumps. This time they enhanced their tactic further by setting a deadly trap. A drone operator first lands an FPV drone without a flag on top of a water pump, aiming to arouse Russian suspicion. When Russian commanders sent a soldier to investigate, he begins climbing to inspect the object. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians use another drone to monitor the situation. As the Russian soldier reaches the level of the FPV drone, they remotely detonate it, causing him to fall down the stairs he just climbed. Elevating their tactics to an even bolder level, the Ukrainians carried out a daring operation by placing a flag atop a massive ship crane in the water near Kherson. This highly visible location can be seen from both banks of the river, posing an additional challenge to the Russian forces. These actions have inflicted substantial losses on Russian personnel and caused significant disruptions for local Russian commanders, who are already under scrutiny from higher ranks for their performance. To date, there have been around a dozen such Ukrainian operations, which have proven highly effective to the point that other Ukrainian units began deploying this tactic in other directions, as it can be seen in this geolocated footage from the Bakhmut area. Overall, Ukrainian forces continue to challenge the Russians across the Dnipro River by not only maintaining and expanding their foothold in and around Krinky, but also by constantly developing and employing innovative tactics involving drones to inflict additional damage on the enemy. These actions compelled the Russians to maintain substantial forces in this region, ranging from 75,000 to 90,000 personnel, comparable to the heavily contested areas of Donbass. This significant commitment ultimately aids the Ukrainian defenders in Donbas, helping them withstand repeated waves of Russian attacks.